the amount of people that I actually have this conversation with privately, women who turn around to me and go, that happened to me. My experience of this nearly genuinely killed me. I actually ended up bleeding out 3 or 4 days later in a cafe. I was a shell of myself. One day I woke up feeling so much pain, devastation, and really, really fatigued, like to the point where I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get up. And this voice was like, get up and move. And I was like, no, I can't. It was like, get up and move, put some music on and just start to move your body. And I did it. I started to really see improvements. If I did that each morning, I could get up, is the bottom line. If I didn't do it, I wouldn't get up.
So straight in, I want to talk to you first of all about your journey with movement. So if we take you back to Emma Marshall Jr., what was movement like for you as a child?
So I was sporty spice. I was like an athlete. I played football to a really high level. I was cross-country champion. I played every single sport in my school. Like the PE teachers loved me. I was that girl. And sport was my actual life. So I was probably training 6-7 days a week easy, like whether that was in matches or in events or actual training sessions.
Where did that come from? Was it from your environment? Because as a girl growing up, to be so active was, or is a rarity in terms of, or there comes a turning point at a certain age where that suddenly they lose interest, unfortunately. So I'm really interested in, where did you get the motivation to move, or was it from family, environment in school, a particular teacher?
Both. So my parents are very active, like even now they're really, really active people. But the football thing came from this guy called Cheyenne, who was my football trainer when we was in primary school. I went to primary school with Green. He was like, she's got something. I don't know what it is, but she's got something. She can actually really control a football very, very well from like age 5 or 6. So he used to then put me into all the competitions with the boys. So I was in all the boys' competitions, and naturally, I think just from that, I was a tomboy. Like I would dress in tracksuits and football kits. My mum would try and put me in a dress. It would be like an absolute no. I wasn't very girly. And then I got scouted. But back then, we were playing at like tiny little, football pitches that didn't even have nets. And so where I was in that kind of environment all the time, you want to be the best. And I was the best most of the time. That's the thing. And then so when I went into Tottenham and I was in the academy, and we were playing with girls.
Wait.
Yeah. I was scouted.
You just kind of like, hold on, wait. You skipped the whole thing. We were playing on a pitch with no nets. Yeah. And then suddenly you're in Tottenham. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I did a football tournament in my primary school. And this is when it was actually girls as well. I think we must have been in year 6. And I remember it so clearly. It was opposite New River Sports Centre, like in White Hart Lane. And yeah, I got scouted for Tottenham, and I was a Tottenham fan because that was my local club. And so it was a big thing back then.
It's a big thing now.
Yeah, it was a big deal. And so I was in Tottenham from like age 10, and so I was playing for the women's team all the way up until I was like 16, I think. And then at 16, that's when you have to make a decision. Are you going to go into the women's, or because the girls is still under 16? During that process, I broke my foot. And it was a weird break as well, because the NHS unfortunately misdiagnosed me, once the many misdiagnoses I've had in my life. They told us it was a sprain, and it wasn't. I'd basically got an extra bone in my foot, and it was that bone that had broken, and they missed it somehow. So I was walking around on this broken foot, and it really affected my, and even just like mobility, and like it was touching like one of my tendons. So it became like a real thing. I was in a lot of physio. I was wearing one of them boots. They became like a thing now, where they blow the boot up so you'd have to wear the cast. Okay. Back then this was not a normal thing. People were like, what have you got on? And I had to wear it for about 6 months. And I think at that point I was like, I've spent my whole life pretty much like doing this. What else is there? So that's then when I started going raving, because I finally had my weekends back. Like when you're training that much, you don't go out, you don't go raving, you don't do, like even parks on a weekend because all your friends are there drinking and smoking and doing all that. I just wasn't really doing that because I was playing football. So I kind of had this break, and then it was like, oh, look, there's a life outside of sport, but also the discipline always, I think, follows you. So, yeah.
So here you are playing for Tottenham, and then you have an injury that forces you to make a decision. How did it affect you in terms of mentally? If you were used to moving and operating at a high level, being disciplined and all those things, like how does that affect you?
So around that time, there were 3 very prominent deaths in my life. So one of them was my football manager, and then 2 of them were very close family friends. And so, like you said before, there was all this movement going on. There was always a channel for whatever you were feeling. And I didn't understand this. Obviously, this concept was alien to me, but that was always the case. If I felt angry, I'd kick a football. It's kind of that simple. So with grief and trying to figure out grief as a 16-year-old with a broken foot without being able to then play or move and do all these kind of things, it was really, really, really difficult. And so that is actually when I first started experiencing physical anxiety to the point of panic attacks. I was actually in hospital several times because they thought I had asthma. It was never asthma. It was always anxiety, to the point I literally was like, I can't breathe, I'm going to drop dead. Like, it happened a few times. It happened in the gym when I was trying to do some strength training to get my body back. So then I kind of had a bit of a, I'm not going to exercise. That was how I felt about it, because it was always during exercise that I'd feel this anxiety coming up. But now I know what I know. I would say that the exercise was just bringing on emotion. Yeah, it's that simple.
This is interesting because through my own experience of boxing and my journey of movement, and even research that comes out, and you speak a lot about this as well, as the connection with trauma and physical movement to shift. How I've understood it is that trauma lives in the body, and it's a very real thing, and it's almost calcified, and it's hard, and it takes movement to shift or move that energy so that these emotions can come out.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I mean, so if we take it into the even just like more simple terms, like trauma is a type of stress. So there's different types of stress, and traumatic stress is one of those types of stress. Chronic stress and acute stress can also live in the body. And if you don't deal with acute stress, it will move into chronic stress. And then chronic stress will have massive impact on how you're feeling, your physical body, your endocrine system, everything. It will have a knock on. Trauma, but also stress in general, is a physiological experience that comes also with emotion. Like, when somebody stresses you out, you're going to feel certain emotions, of course. It's all to do with understanding this concept that in the immediate, if you can do stuff that's going to help you to process the feelings that that experience has left you with, you're going to find, clearance a lot quicker and process things a lot quicker than if you just kind of box it off and you don't want to feel anything, you don't want to do anything about it, because it's all completely interlinked. There's kind of no one without the other. But the research is also showing, you know, there's a side to the research in regards to like epigenetics, which is showing that trauma is passed down, and it's in the cells and it's in the fascia. That's why doing things movement based, even if you have gone through something really specific, are going to help you release that fascia. Like, it's really, really key that you do it, because we can't talk our way out of it. It does have to be a physical kind of process.
I love that concept, and I love what you said about clearance.
The whole concept of emotion is that it's energy. So the literal meaning of the word emotion, emotion, is energy in motion. Comes from the Latin word emotere. It's not being like proven, you know, that we could prove things all day long, but also I personally find it fascinating that languages such as Latin back then knew what emotion was and were able to give it the literal name and meaning, which was, if you're feeling something, it needs to move, it's trying to move. We are not in that way of thinking at all. What we do is we just go, well, we don't even label it half the time. We don't even know how we feel. We're just clueless. So if you kind of break it down into the most simple forms, that it's just energy trying to move, it's a feeling trying to move. Because joy, right? Joy is an emotion. What comes with joy? Laughter. That's us moving the joy. We can't contain the joy, so we start to laugh. That's also movement. And so I think that it's not even that difficult to kind of understand. It can be broken down into really simple terms, but it's just about getting people into the concept and understanding that your body is an energetic system. Like, it just is. It's electrical and chemical at the source. Your nervous system is an electrical and chemical system, and that is intrinsically linked to how we, you know, work with and produce emotion. Being able to understand just that concept, that you are going to feel something and that feeling will need to move to shift it and change, it kind of changes everything.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing, because also then you start to engage different tools as to shift specific feelings and energy and understand what that is for yourself. So here you are in terms of your football journey, careers, gone a different path. You've ended that and now you've moved into raving.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to this moment where you identified, or didn't identify actually, you were having these panic attacks which you couldn't quite label or understand why, and just associated ironically with movement. So then you stopped movement. What happened then in terms of you going to raving, and like what was your connection with your body and your emotions, and being able to, if you were able to process the grief, the upset?
I just knew the only thing I could understand from the rave scene was that when I went out, I felt better. That's it. That's all I understood. And I wasn't into the more hedonistic side. You know, I think that most people that have gone raving have had their moments, but it was never really my thing. What I wanted to go out for was the music. And also I was poor. I saved up my money as a waitress for a £20 ticket to go out and see some drum and bass DJ or some garage DJ or grime MC or whatever it was. Like, that was what I was spending my money on, and then drinking tap water, like, just
Same.
to go and dance.
I worked to rave.
Yeah,
that time. Yeah.
Facts. So that element for me was that, okay, I'm here sober because I'm just so connected to the tunes and the music or who's on the mic or whatever it is. This is all I need. I don't need anything else. And so being able to kind of like come out of a rave and feel like I've just, I don't even know, climbed a mountain, like that exhilaration, and then go home, have a sleep, wake up and just be like, oh, I feel great. I feel normal. It was so interesting at this time as well, because I was at university. I went to Anglia Ruskin in Cambridge, and I don't really know why I picked Cambridge, but I did. It was close enough to London. I think that's why I picked it. But I used to just come back because I used to think Cambridge was so dead. So I used to come back every single weekend. I'd do uni in the day, go and do work at a Premier Inn as a waitress, and then I'd save up all my tips and drive back to London and go to rave. And that was me. And my mum would be like, well, you're not going gym, you're not doing any of that. And I'm like, I don't need to. Like, I literally am so active in all these other ways. Like, I just don't really feel like I need to. But I didn't really understand the connection at that point in any way, shape or form. I just knew that this is what made me feel better every single time. And I'd also, at this point, I'd been into like some counselling. I'd had some other stuff happen at uni that had like tipped my anxiety over the edge. I was attacked. Like, there was a whole thing that happened with that. And so I just knew that like the talking wasn't helping me. I'd gone to the GP, I'd gone, you know, it was the standard kind of conversation, like, I'll take these meds or whatever. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, that's not really helpful. And then I did the counselling, but it was a bit like, don't really think this is helping either. It's making me just feel a bit worse. And then I'd go out and I'm like, this is really what's helping me. So yeah, I did that for a long time. But during that time, I also was really kind of set on, I want to do something in music. Like, I'm not playing music, I'm not DJing, I'm not doing any of that, but there's the music industry. So I'm going to try and figure out how to work in it. And just from knowing people and just going out so much and knowing different DJs and whatever, I did manage to get like little jobs here and there. I was like a flyer girl, I was a guest list girl. I wrote for like a music paper on like what nights I'd been to. I did all that kind of stuff. So by the time I'd finished university, my mum was like, well, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, I don't know. I did teaching assistant work for 2 years. I worked with SEN kids, and it was really great because even now I really like teaching. Like, as I said, I was a footballer, but I was also a football coach. That's teaching. So I really liked teaching, but I did not like the system. And because I was working with kids with special needs, I really saw the flaws big time, especially for kids with ADHD, which is what I was working with. And I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. And I don't feel like I can be a part of this. So I stopped doing that, and then said to my mum, I was like, I'm going to go get a job in the music industry. And she was like, well, how are you going to do that? You don't know anyone. And I was like, well, I do, sort of. And I messaged my friend, and he got me a job at a festival that he was working on. And from there, it just literally just went bang, 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 bang. And I just kind of cemented myself quite easily and quite quickly into like various different jobs. And then it all just went from there. And I ended up working with some of the biggest companies in the world.
Amazing. So your journey of movement continued.
Yeah.
And it led you to a place of employment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what year is this around about?
So this is now, so I first started working in music properly full time, like 2013. And then, 2014, like so kind of like paving my way. But that's where I got burnt out. That's where I got really burnt out. I didn't know burnout was a thing. I didn't understand it. I'd never heard of it before. But I was doing like 4 different jobs. And like, I mean, I'm not talking like freelancing. I'm talking, I was doing 4 jobs. Yeah. So there was so much work going on and I just didn't have a break. My mind couldn't shut off. As somebody that was obviously predisposed as well to anxiety, like, this is the thing I always say this to people, is that I've never, when I was ill, which we'll go on to, I was definitely depressed. It was circumstantial. That had a reason to be depressed. I just don't naturally get depressed. I get very anxious and like overwhelmed to the point where it's like, can't breathe, paralyzing, can't breathe, can't move, like that kind of thing. But I never feel depressed. I never feel like hopeless. I'm just like, I've just got to figure out how to shift out of this. And I always do.
It's interesting because it's like it's like you're frozen, paralyzed, literally. But actually the thing that helps you get out of it is the movement.
Well, this is how I explain it to people. So freeze is an actual nervous system response. It's a biological response to danger, which is shut down, which is when animals play dead. We do the same. So when we're that scared and overwhelmed, paralyzed by fear, we play dead. And that's what can look like, massive fatigue and not being able to move and not being able to talk and whatever. That's my natural response when I'm too overwhelmed. And what I explain to people is it's a bit like musical statues. So imagine that you're playing a musical statue, somebody turns off the music, you're all frozen. To wake yourself back up, turn the music on and unfreeze yourself.
Simple.
Yeah.
It's so simple. It's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Really simple.
So easy. So that's how I did it for myself. And that's how I continue to do it. And even to this day, I still get anxious.
But how did you know? That's what I'm interested in, because you've experienced these things. And as we grow, the things that we've experienced in our younger states, trauma or like upset accumulation, we don't quite know how to process it. And then suddenly as we get older, or, hopefully we learn some tools, we try and shift some things, but sometimes we don't make the connections. So here you are where movement has been a big part of your life, but you at this point, how did you identify that there's a real connection with you feeling better, not being paralyzed by anxiety or the things that have happened to you, and a way to connect the movement as an actual genuine tool to shift through?
So very, very long story short, 2014, after that, I got really sick, like physically ill.
This is the burnout,
but it was the knock-on effect for me was so physical. I had issues with my kidneys. I was in hospital I then broke my arm and then was diagnosed with this like mad chronic pain, nervous system disease, where they told me that was my life and that was it. And then I had to have my appendix out, and this was all in the space of 6 months. So for me, as a very inquisitive person that always wants to know why, and it's like a blessing and a curse, but I was like, you lot need to tell me why. I'm 25, I'm relatively healthy, like I don't eat a terrible diet, I'm not overweight, I'm not any of these things. So on paper, I'm healthy, I'm clearly not. What's going on? They were like, no, it's not connected. I was like, well, it is. So at that point, I removed myself from Western medicine. I went very holistic with trying to get my strength back, my body back. So I started to go into like nutrition and herbs and all that kind of stuff. And I really got myself to like a much better place. I quit my job. I got a new job. Like all these kind of things started to fall back into place for me. But I don't feel like I ever fully recovered. And it's because I hadn't hit the nervous system, trauma, stress piece.
The emotion.
Hadn't hit it yet. And when you go through health stuff like that, like I was almost treated like a guinea pig because they didn't know what was wrong with me. So it was just like one thing after the other. And it was so mentally and physically exhausting having to advocate for yourself when you're also essentially being gaslighted by a load of doctors. And then it like kind of told, well, this is just how you have to live. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. Like that for me was never an option. I was never getting told by one person, here's my opinion of you. Like that's never going to be a thing. Whereas so many people take that as gospel. And I always tell people, if you're on a health journey, keep going. Because, there's some times where it's like, yeah, I need to take and absorb and accept. And there's other times where it's like, there's no way. Because if you can't tell me why and give me the reasons as to why this is going on, and it's all under the kind of bracket of it's a mystery, no, then your opinion is not relevant. So that was kind of like a huge thing for me. Now, my ex is a boxer, and he pulled me out of a freeze hole after this whole year and was like, you're going to come and train with me. So I started to box with him, and I definitely got some strength back. He also introduced me to the psoas muscle because it's so big in boxing because of the way that your hips are moving. It's like dancing, boxing. Yeah. It's so interesting. So he introduced me to the psoas muscle. Now he did some psoas stretching on me. Oh my days. I was screaming.
It's not pleasant.
I was screaming. And I was like, what are you doing? Like thinking that he was obviously like doing something wrong. He was like, no, you don't understand. He was like, your whole hips are completely locked up from all this trauma. So we need to get rid of it. So he introduced me to the psoas muscle. And that's actually in my method now. We do hip work in the method to music to release that muscle. And it's not as painful as that. It's just people starting to realize how tight they are. And then it's basically getting them to wind their waist.
Yeah. But there's a belief that as women, I've read as well, that as women, this is where we hold a lot of our heart emotion is in our hips.
I think for most people, but I think for women in particular, because first of all, I think that women tend to be more emotional. I just do. I think we feel a lot more. It's part of our biology. I don't think it's even just a thought or philosophy. Like I really do think that that's part of our biology. We feel a lot more. And the feelings will go into the body somewhere. For women in particular, the hips, you know, that's such a pivotal point. That's our childbirth point, right? And they change over time. Our hormones are so prevalent in those areas as well, but also most importantly, the nervous system. So that muscle is directly linked to our fight and flight responses. When we're in fight and flight, that muscle will contract. So when it's contracted, it's staying solid. And so for most people, they don't even have a clue how stiff their hips are or how tight their hips are. And so just doing a little bit of movement with the hips is going to unlock that. So he kind of catalyzed that for me back then. But again, I didn't even...
It's just, the seeds are being sown.
Yes, were planted. And I told him since I bumped into him, like even just like 6 months ago, and I was like, you do realize? And he was like, what? No way. This kind of stuff, it's always the seeds, right? So from when I was younger, like as we mentioned, like football, and then to raving, now into this world where I'm ill and I've got pain, I've got chronic pain, I've got nerve issues, I've got all these things going on. And then it got to 2018 and I had to have an operation. So I haven't really spoken about this, but I feel like this is probably a good platform to share it on, because women don't tend to have this conversation too much. But I basically got pregnant and it was with the wrong person. We had just met. Contraception had failed. It was just one of those calamity kind of...
instant got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Instantly.
Yeah, one thing after the other. And so many women have gone through this, but we're always talking about, pro-choice or not or whatever. I don't think that's the conversation. I think the conversation is we need to start talking to women who have had this experience that have not had a good experience of this at all. And my experience of this nearly genuinely killed me. I chose to terminate, which already was so difficult. Like every part of me was like, I didn't want to do it, but I felt like I had to. I didn't want to bring a child into the world with somebody I barely knew. It just wasn't in my plan, and I didn't feel like it was the right thing to do. So I chose, because I was so distraught over this whole situation, that I was going to get a surgical abortion rather than the pill.
Okay.
So I was like, at least I'll be put to sleep, I won't remember it. It went wrong. And they ended up leaving the fetus inside. So I actually ended up bleeding out 3 or 4 days later in a cafe, ended up going into the hospital, and they were like, yeah, you should be fine. This is pretty common. And I was like, okay, cool. I went home and I was already like not okay as well. Like I was really not okay, let alone this then happening. And then 2 days later, they called me and they were like, sorry, we've actually made a massive mistake. Can you come in? Because we think you might be in septic shock. And I was like, okay. So I went in, I had to have this whole internal exam, and then they were like, yeah, we're going to have to give you another abortion. Like you have to take these medications, otherwise you're going to go into sepsis. It was a whole thing. And I was like, none of you are touching me. Like, you're just not touching me. Go away. There's an option. There's always an option. So give me my options. And they were like, well, you have to take the medication, but we can pray basically that Mother Nature will take its course and you'll pass it naturally. And I was like, that's my option then, because you're not touching me again. I think that for me, having that much trauma in that area anyway, that was already not, functioning that well, I locked up and I just started to get so sick. And at first I thought it was because obviously there was this whole conversation of sepsis. There was this whole, the trauma in itself. And I was like, I genuinely think I've got PTSD. Like, I'm not okay. And I ended up walking into a sexual health clinic one day. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I saw a doctor and I wrote on the form, I was like, I had an abortion and I just want to die. Like, I just can't cope. And we spoke about it and she was like, that's trauma. That's big trauma. And I hadn't ever had that conversation before by anyone, the abortion services that I was talking to, because they give you counselling, but it's just people on the phone who they're not trained in trauma. They're just trained to be like, it's okay. And it's like, it's not okay, because they've traumatized me.
Yeah.
And this is a big thing for my mind and body. And the amount of women that I tell this, I don't talk about it too publicly, because there's some things I'm like, I'll keep to yourself. But I'm starting to realize the amount of people that I actually have this conversation with privately, women who turn around to me and go, that happened to me.
I'm going to say that happened to me.
Okay.
I really appreciate you sharing. It happened to me. It didn't happen on the scale. I was 21. I decided to terminate. And already emotionally, it is a hard decision. So there's so much to weigh up. And so emotionally, you're already feeling it. So what had happened was I had a surgical abortion, and this was on Christmas, like a few days before Christmas. And then I was getting chronic pain, like crippling. And I ended up going to A&E. And I spent Christmas Day in hospital, and what they'd left basically some remnants of the fetus, and they had to do what they call a D&C, which is another scrape. You already are making a hard decision, and then for it to it's not over.
It's not over.
And then I can only imagine that was on a small scale, but now you're getting like really sick. And on top of that, you don't have any trust in the people around you. So what I want to say is, you sharing that is, you advocated for yourself, which in a time, in a moment, like not many people, that's huge, Emma. Like, you're able to say no.
Yeah, no way.
Yeah, no. And that's massive, because that's also part of your journey of saying, whatever this is, I don't know what it is, but this is a no. And I think that's powerful. Even in your traumatic state, you were able to say,
yeah, no way.
Yeah, protect yourself in that.
This is the thing that I always say, is like, I'm not anti-Western medicine, and I'm not anti-doctor, and I know a lot of doctors who are amazing, but my experiences with the medical system have not been positive, and they've actually made me sicker. And that's important for me to talk about, because that is my experience, and I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not. But in that instance in particular, I have never experienced doctors who were so cold, non-compassionate. Like, this woman spoke like a robot with her hands inside of me. It's just like, I basically started crying when she gave me the news, and she was like, what's wrong with you? That was what she said. What's wrong with you? And I said to her, are you kidding? I was like, this should have been over, and now it's not. And now the conversation that we're now having is one that is completely robotic. There's no compassion from you. You've just put your hands up inside me, and you think that this is, oh, I'm just going to let you do it again. I don't trust you lot right now, because you've made this so much worse. So the whole kind of like series of events from there, I just got sicker and sicker and sicker. And I also stopped going out, stopped seeing anyone, I stopped doing anything. I was a shell of myself. And at this point as well, like, I'd finally kind of got to a point in my career that I had a really great job that I loved, and I was so happy in it. And I was working on some really good projects. And
is this in music?
Yeah. And I was devastated, because it was like, I don't know how I'm going to sustain this, because I'm getting sicker, but I'm going to just hold on for as long as I can. And then I went to functional medicine, because I was like, well, at least they're, you know, the next step away, that they understand some other stuff. They were like, oh, you've got Lyme disease and you've got mold poisoning and all the things they kind of are obsessed with. And then I was like, right, okay. So then they gave me this treatment protocol, and I was like, was that it? Like, I don't feel like this is it. And they just put me on this protocol that I didn't really agree with, where it was like doing coffee enemas every day. And it's like billions of supplements and herbs. And I'm like, this is the same as Western medicine. You just changed.
Packaged it.
Yeah,
differently.
totally the same. So again, my trust is like minimal at this point. And then I got told about this hospital in Mexico where they do like integrative treatment, especially in regards to things like cancer and mold and Lyme, and also mystery illness. So I was kind of under the bracket at this point of like mystery illness. So I went out there. They discovered that I had like no immune system. I had infections that had taken over. I had issues with my endocrine system. I'd stopped making cortisone. Like, it would just, I was on the brink of disease because I just stopped making it. And I had issues with my nervous system. And I had so many different types of really intense treatment, especially in regards to these infections, that I couldn't fight. I couldn't walk. I started having seizures. I was so ill and also so traumatized
and scared
and terrified. I was on my own. You know, my family didn't, have money. We had to raise money. This is the thing. So like, we raised enough money, and then eventually when I started having seizures and not being able to walk, my dad had to fly out on a last, like, God knows how much that cost, but like he had to just fly out because it got really serious. And I got to the point where I was like, I need someone here, like this is too much. And then I ended up staying in Mexico because I needed to recover. And even when I was in Mexico, I still hadn't put together these pieces because I was still just so in the trauma of it all. So when I came back, I'd gone from like living this like life in Mexico where I was able to like wake up to the sun, eating, you know, decent food. There was a beach there, the jungle's there, very connected to the earth. I felt okay. And I felt like I got to a point of my recovery that I was like, I'm going to go home. I got home and I just fully crashed. And I now know, again, it's like trauma does that to you. It's like there are so many different triggers and there's so much to now unpack. I've had years of this. This wasn't like a one-off experience. Incident.
It's an accumulation.
It's an accumulation of huge trauma. This is the thing for a lot of people. Complex PTSD comes from the smaller traumas that then add up to one big one. I just had one big one after the other. It took ages, but then basically I was given the flat in Ladbroke Grove by my best friend because obviously I have nothing. I had a suitcase to my name. I had nothing. My mum and dad had also left London. They'd moved out of London, and then the pandemic hit. So I was about to set up my life in this flat, and then it was a pandemic. So there was no support. I had no therapist. I had no physio. I had no gym that I needed to get back to strength and everything. I knew what to do. I couldn't do it. And so I know that you're a spiritual person. Like one day I woke up feeling so much pain, devastation. Physically, I was a mess and really, really fatigued, like to the point where I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get up. And this voice that I can only say was God was like, get up and move. And I was like, no, I can't. It was like, get up and move, put some music on and just start to move your body. And I did it. And I was like, oh, actually, just kind of, and it was drum and bass, actually. That's what I started playing. And I was like, actually, I am starting to feel a little bit less pain. I'm starting to feel better. And so over the course of, you know, a few weeks, a few months, I started to really see improvements in if I did that each morning, I could get up, is the bottom line. If I didn't do it, I wouldn't get up.
Were we talking like a song, 5 minutes?
So, yeah, it was 5 minutes usually to start with. And then after that, it was like mixes and like building it up. And I just was like, oh, yeah, okay. And so that's when I started to study and go into the nervous system, trauma, movement, connection. But before this, I'd actually met a woman who had kind of sort of slightly pushed me into that world. It wasn't her world of expertise, but she just kind of got me to see the body more as an energetic thing rather than just like flesh and bone. So she was the kind of catalyst for me doing all of, again, seeds. It was just seeds being planted. So where I then started to, move a lot more, finding like a change in how I was feeling if I did move versus how I didn't move, and then putting together the research, that's where everything kind of started to slot together. At this point, I'm like teaching people about like holistic health. That's how I started to make a living. I was like, this is what I've discovered, because obviously when you're in mystery illness, you are just researching. That's all you're doing. I had so much information that I was like, I'm just going to start sharing it. And if it resonates with people, then great. If it doesn't. And so I started to work with people one-to-one and just like coaching them through certain things and like getting them into the understanding of like the nervous system is the key, but also here's some supportive herbs and this is what in nutrition wise. So by the end of 2020, I realized I was like, I'm going to need a break from all of this because the pandemic, I've just done 3 years of illness. I mean, I'm done. So I went back to Mexico. And Mexico's always had a special place in my heart because the first time I went out there was in 2013 to work at a music festival. So I'd always been going back and forth from there anyway. So I knew it really well. So this time I went back to live, and I lived there for like a full year. And when I was there, I spent the time studying. That was all I was there for. It was to like, for me to recover really from PTSD because I couldn't really complete that cycle in London. It was all just a bit too much. I think if the pandemic hadn't hit, it would be a different story, but not in London.
I watched your journey in terms of, I always find out it sounds a bit weird when you're like, I watched you on social media, but I felt very inspired by you and that journey that you were sharing in Mexico. You shared little bits of why you were there, but not the full picture.
Yeah, exactly.
And I what I did see was that you were on a quest.
Yeah,
you were on a quest of information, and I appreciated and valued what you shared as well.
Oh, thank you.
I dipped in and out of social media, and the things that you shared, I felt this person's on a journey.
Yeah,
definitely.
That was it. It was the quest. That's how I felt. It was literally a quest. It was like, I've got to complete this part of the mission before I can go home to properly do this, because I had the idea in my head for ages. before it was even a thing, I had the idea in my head.
Your seeds.
Yeah, the seeds were there. And, you know, studying with the tribes and looking at the tribes, not just in Mexico, but also then started to look at Africa and looking at like the actual origins of where they utilize movement to release stress and trauma, and the drums and all of this kind of combination. But it's the thing that I found the most interesting. I was like, in every single ancient culture that exists to this day, the drums are there and the movement is there.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
it. Those two components exist in every single culture, and in our culture, it's raving. Like,
yeah, it's
really,
foundational.
It's foundation, right? So that was kind of it for me. It was like putting together all these different pieces of my life, my experience, and then learning, of course, like the new stuff and the old stuff, but yeah, the new stuff. And then putting that all together and merging it, because I'm like, all right, we are Westerners. And for a lot of people in the West, they need to know why something works. They want the science, they want to understand it. So I'm going to do that, because that way we will be able to reach a much wider audience than if it was just, trust me, bro. Like, do you know what I mean? Because there is absolutely
also,
that element
living
to it.
You're
Totally.
like you're the living, breathing example. It's inspiring as well, because I'm interested in people who go through experiences and challenges, trauma, whatever you want to call it, and connect it with their own healing journey. And then how do they share that with others in a way that feels good?
That right there, in a way that feels good. Because this is my biggest thing, is that when I was younger, I was never interested in, like, you know, doing fitness to look a certain way. I didn't really care about how I looked, to be perfectly honest. It was like I just looked healthy because I was healthy. And that is such a mad thing for me now that obviously I'm more in the fitness world in some way, shape or form. Our tagline is redefining exercise. And one of the things I'm trying to get across to people is like, if you just start moving properly, you'll just naturally lose weight, feel good, look good, you'll glow. It's a very natural occurrence for your body to compute and keep up with how you're moving. It's that simple. And we're obsessed with like, what movements do I need to do to lose weight? It's like, no, just move. Just start moving. Even if you do have like, chronic illness, or you're going through a health journey, which so many people are now. This is the thing. It's not, oh, there's only a few people that are ill. It's like most people have a syndrome or a condition now that makes them feel like they can't exercise or they can't move, or it's not for them, because they look at all these fitness influencers who are all, you know, ripped and toned and doing gym 24/7. It's like, no. Like, let's just bring it back to the basics.
Feeling good.
Does it make you feel good? Like, that's it. And the thing that with dance, for me anyway, like when I was ill and as I said, like, you know, in pain and whatever, it was like, this makes me feel good. Whatever it's doing, I don't even care at this point. It just makes me feel better and it makes me feel good. And that's the key with this. It's like getting people's mindset to change out of the conditioning that we've had around fitness or exercise in the past, and just redefine what those words mean. It shouldn't be about what you look like. It should actually be about what you feel like. And most of the time, just small amounts of movement can be so beneficial for you. You don't have to do these like big things.
Yeah. I spoke to you earlier when we were having a conversation about the words that are banned from your marketing and the things that you're sharing. Can you just explain a little bit about the movement is medicine? First of all, I love the name. It does what it says in the tin, and exactly that. It just is very clear that when we move, we feel good. Even watching you move, even though when I first saw you on socials, you were dancing and moving to tunes that I related to and loved, and I was like, there's something emotional connection, because there's some sort of vulnerability here in terms of someone just moving freely to anybody who they don't know is watching. And then I feel you look joyful. So then instantly I'm watching you moving, I feel joyful. And then I also feel inspired to move.
Yeah.
So these are all the things. In terms of movement is medicine, now that you've created a whole method, what does that look like?
So the method itself is rooted in combining the neuroscience elements of somatic workouts. So that's all the nervous system work with music and dance. But the music is like the key. Like, it is the key. And it's so funny because there's so many people out there now that are doing, you know, nervous system things and whatever. But for us, it's the combination of that element with the music, because the music is so specific to the way in which we complete the method. So the method itself is done as like sort of two parts. The first half is all seated. So we work with the physical body, getting people into the rhythm of the music, but in turn, they'll get into the rhythm of their own body. It's kind of that simple. when you stop thinking, oh, I can't dance, or I can't move, or I can't do this, or whatever, you're not meant to. Like, put me in a choreographed dance class, worst person in there. I cannot be told how to move to music. It's just not possible. And I always tell people, like, look at babies, they just move however they want. We were a baby at one point, so we should just be moving. So what we do in the first bit is we work from the feet all the way up to the top of the head, doing nervous system regulation techniques. So that's like tapping and squeezing certain parts of the body, working with certain muscle groups, working with certain breathing techniques. But the premise of it really is about the rhythm of the music, because all of these things are combined, exercise or movement in general, music, tapping and touch, and breathing techniques have all been shown to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is where we're calm and relaxed and connected. We just push them all into one kind of very simple methodology. So the first bit is about getting people to complete whatever stress cycle they may have been in. So we see like a lot of yawning, we see people just like relaxing, the tension is starting to like melt off of them basically. And then the second half, we speed the tunes right up. And that's where we go into like the release exercises, where the purpose of that is to like make your body as big as possible, because when we're stressed, we make ourselves small. Where we're embraced, that's where everything locks up in the hips, etc. So we're doing some release exercises to get people aware of how big they can make their body. And then we just dance. And by that point, people are so connected to their own body and aware of their own body, they don't care what they look like. It doesn't matter. And that's the beauty of raving. And that's why I love the rave culture element to it, is, but like when you walk into a rave, no one's like, oh, look at them. Like, it just doesn't happen. That's kind of what we've tried to recreate here. But my whole thing is that we have to get people into the body first before we just make them all dance. They're not going to want to just walk into a room and dance. And when that does happen, it can be very awkward. So the regulation part is the absolute key to this. And that's the bit that is really the methodology. You know, it's not just about dance. Dance is such a huge component, of course, but actually everything we do, even in the first bit, is a form of movement, because we're starting to realize like, oh, are my calves tight? Oh, okay. There's some sensation in my thigh. All right, cool. I'm starting to feel maybe some warmth in my chest. You'll start to become aware of the sensations. Yeah. And because you become aware of the sensations, if you don't like it, you can move it because you become aware of it. Yeah. And that's really the premise of why it works.
It's profound. It's really just about connecting with self.
Yeah,
so you're using physical examples to be like, oh, this is my shoulder, or you talk about into the body, which is a phrase that you're like, well, what does that actually mean? It's actually, this is my leg, this is how it's feeling, this is connection with my own body. So now I'm able to have a conversation and check in. Then I can go a little bit deeper and be like, oh, how, like, what does this feel like? How? Yeah,
exactly. Because have you ever done a body scan like on a meditation app?
Yeah.
So we're like the next level above a body scan. So the body scan, you just do it in your head. You like think about your toes and focus on your toes and whatever. We're actually physically doing it because the body is always present. This is the key, right? Your body is always present. It's always here. It's the mind. The mind goes.
It sounds so obvious.
I know.
Why do we not know? Like, how have we not known this since whenever?
I know.
It sounds obvious.
I know. But this is it. This is what we try and do, is like, it is obvious, but we break it down into the most layman terms you can possibly find, because it should just be accessible information for as many people as possible. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's not, because people either try and make themselves into like a guru where they're like, only I know, or it's very sciencey, and therefore loads of people are just like completely shut away and switched off because it's like, it's not for me, I don't get it, I'm not intelligent enough. And like, I've had this a lot where people assume sometimes that I'm just the face of it. And I'm like, no, this is all my work. This is me. I've written it from scratch. It's all mine. And I think that comes with like the way that I talk even. Like, I've done workshops before where people have come up to me and been like, I am so glad to hear a voice that sounds like yours, because normally it's just like, you know, posh old people who are just trying to tell me what to think and what to say and what to do. I don't resonate with any of it. And I'm like, you're not really probably meant to. This is how simple it can be. We don't need to make it into this, oh, la-di-da, like it's, you know, for elites, whatever. It's like, that's not what we're here to do. We're here to make this as like grassroots foundation as possible and make it so simple that people go like you just done, like, oh, well, yeah, duh. And because the body is the source of, you know, what we use, what it does as well is it gives people a different relationship with their body. So most people are really disconnected from how they feel. They're not aware of their bodies. They actually even hate their bodies because either they don't work because they're not well for some reason, or physically they don't like their body, and then it goes into the mind and whatever. It's all completely interconnected. With that in mind, what we're trying to do is essentially bridge that gap between all of these different elements between the mind and the body that disconnect us by creating that relationship so that you understand how you're talking to yourself. And then you start to find some gratitude, because I've been there. I've been in that position where I'm like, I hate myself. I hate my body. It's not working. You know, I'm angry at myself all the time. I'm angry at everything. It's not a good place to be. And also,
the voice is loud,
and you're not going to get better. Yeah. More importantly, you're actually not going to get better if you're talking to yourself like that. Like, there's so many studies now about the way that we talk to ourselves and the words and the impacts the words have and blah, blah, blah. So we have to consistently create that safety in the body. And so the way in which the method kind of works is similar to hypnotherapy. So when you go and do hypnotherapy, the purpose of it is to bring you into theta state. So in theta state, that's where you're like completely connected in mind and body. Your conscious and your conscious mind and unconscious mind bridge. So where they're bridged, you're able to process what you need to process, and that's where things come to the conscious mind. You go, oh, okay, cool, that's what that is, etc. With this, it's a similar concept in the fact that when we're doing all that rhythm work in the start and we're working with the body as the anchor, that's how you know you're safe, because you're never not going to feel safe because you're connected literally through your own touch. So anything can kind of come up, and then people cry, they laugh, they do whatever, it doesn't matter. It's all a release. You're releasing something. Some people will never know what they're releasing. Doesn't matter. We don't need to go into the story. So it allows the body to do the job for you. And then you're just going to feel lighter and lighter and lighter the more you do it. And so that's where like the mind stuff then comes in, because we use words specifically like safety, like grounded, connected, calm. We use those words for a reason. You won't hear instructors saying, you know, I had this for lunch. Like, it's not a thing, because it's so intentional. Like, every single part of the method is like so specific and intentional based on what I've learned, what trainings I've put myself into,
and your own experience,
and my own experiences, and who I've been around. And that, most importantly, I think for me, is that it's actually fun. Like, there's been so many things that I've done. Like, I've done courses and this and that, and I'm like, this is so dry. Like, it's just so dry. I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy teaching it. I don't enjoy talking about it. Like, it's interesting, but it's just not that fun. This is fun.
Yeah.
Every single one of my instructors are just like, I love it. This is so fun to teach. And that's what I always say to people when they come and do my training, is like, as long as you enjoy it, then you're going to thrive, because the point of it is that you're enjoying it, so they're going to enjoy it. And that's it.
I think there is a huge correlation with joy and feeling joy and others being able to feel it. So it sounds simple again, but a lot of us are not doing that. Just connecting with your own sense of joy, and by doing that, everything else seems to be in flow, or at least coming to you in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. And it is the reason it works is because it is so simple. It's just been put together in a way that is totally accessible to anyone. Yeah,
it's powerful. It's powerful. It's real. You are the personification of triumph over trauma.
No, thank you.
That's our message in terms of Fight Forward, which is, you know, showing that when you move through something hard or challenging, that there's healing and growth on the other side. Of course, it's hard moving through it, but there's a way, and what you're creating is truly medicine.
Thank you.
It's really powerful. What's next?
Yeah, what is next? So we want to take this to that next level now. Like, my biggest thing is we change up our content. It has literally just been me dancing in my kitchen, being like, this thing works.
But it does.
It does work.
It is inspiring to see.
But
there's more.
There's so much more. My whole thing with this is that we want to be this bridge, right, between education. That's the sole value of Movement is Medicine. It's an educational based business, but also the joy. So how to marry and merge those two elements, that's what we're going to be working on moving forward. So the content that we're going to be putting out is going to be not just educational, but also so much focus on the music and building out music content with not just within our network, within like, the music networks and stuff like that. So yeah.
Amazing. That's so exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
So exciting. Watch this space. I loved what you were saying about the route in terms of you actually as well going to different tribes and seeing the connection with music and healing, and not even just healing, but just emotion, joy, and how it's such a foundational part of groups and communities. I feel like there's a deep spirituality when, in terms of, I'm Ghanaian Irish, so both sides are very musically inclined, and there's a real, I feel really a deep sense of connection in terms of music and its power with movement, and that just the ability to move. Like in Ghana, everybody's dancing.
Facts. Yeah.
It felt spiritual.
It is.
I was like, what is happening? The vibration of the drums.
Yeah.
There was nothing else, just the movement, and it was deep. The experience was deep. So I really identify with what you're saying about the connection with the movement and just the spirituality of it, the awareness of self, like moving emotion. You don't even know why you're feeling what you're feeling, but there's such a powerful connection.
Yeah, for sure. Like one of the most interesting tribes that I personally think, anyway, I think they're all interesting, but one of the most interesting is the Umbanda tribe in Brazil. So that's taken from West African teachings, and like looking at the orishas and praying to the orishas through movement and the drum. Like the whole religion, because it is a religion, it's like the second biggest religion in Brazil after Catholicism, which is just colonization. So
that's a whole different podcast.
Whole different podcast. We'll remove that one. But so it's like one of the biggest religions in Brazil is Umbanda, and like the whole thing is that they get around this drum and the drum beats, and there's prayer and there's song, and everyone where they wear certain like white dresses, it's a female led thing. So this is the key. Most of these things are always men. This is a female led thing. The women are playing the drums and doing their thing.
Magic.
And like people go into trances and they, they're vomiting and they release, and sometimes they do it with ayahuasca, and it's like a whole thing, and it's so beautiful because these kind of traditions are age old for a reason. Like the reason that is so interesting, and I found it so interesting, was because with the slave trade from West Africa, that was one of the things that stuck, was the Umbanda tradition. So even though they've been taken from their homeland and then they got to Brazil and it's like new, that was one of the things that stuck amongst slavery because it was the connection still to the homeland. And now it's one of the biggest religions in Brazil. And that's the kind of stuff for me that I'm like, oh my God, I want to learn everything. I want to learn more. I find that so fascinating about how music and movement and prayer can be so deeply ingrained into culture. Whereas in this country, I'm Irish as well. So like, Ireland, I think, is a different conversation. But like, in Britain in general, like we don't necessarily have, especially in London, there's no one religion, there's no one way to do things. And it's about learning from each other in the way in which people connect to God and their own spiritual experiences, and looking at the similarities, because there's more similarities than there are differences. And this is why I find all of this work so interesting, like I said, with the tribes, is because when you look at the tribes, they're so similar. They are so similar.
The core is like music is a universal language, and the drum is like frequency, energy. It's just
heartbeat. Yeah, that's the big one.
No matter, like, even in all types of religions, spiritual practices, there is some sort of musical essence or drum based something that is carrying the message or the frequency or the energy. For
sure. It's across the board. This is the other thing as well. So music is universal, but so is stress. So this is my biggest thing, because there's so many people that will say, I've got the cure, I've got the protocol, come to me. You don't. You just don't, because people are too different. Their genetic makeup, the environment that they're in, like there's so many nuances. Yeah, exactly. But with stress, that is universal. And so is music. So if you can understand just that on its own, then you understand why this would work for just about anyone, because this work is universal for those two reasons.
It's powerful. Your message is powerful. I love what you're doing. I'm inspired. Keep doing, keep moving. It's been magical.
Oh, bless you. Thank you for having me.
Yes,
It's been so great.
you.